Welcome back to another innovation review. Today, we're going to be checking out the Ovia from Cyrusher. But before we jump into the review, I just want to ask you guys to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It really goes a long way in helping us grow the channel. Without further ado, let's get to the review. First, let's talk about the looks. The Ovia is Cyrusher's latest full suspension step-through e-bike. It looks like it's more or less the Komodo 2.0, and I think it's better in almost every way except one, and we'll get to that thing later in the video. The Ovia comes in 3 colors, red, white, and gray. It comes with all the bells and whistles we'd expect from a Cyrusher, such as rear rack, fenders, integrated front lights. It still has a motorcycle feel to it, which is accentuated by the double crown suspension fork and oversized front light, and all in all, it's a pretty slick looking e-bike. Cyrusher offers free shipping and a 2-year warranty on their e-bikes, which is double what some e-bike brands are offering. Now, let's talk about the motor. The motor we have here is a Bafang 750 watt motor, and guess what? It performs exactly as we'd expect. What's different about the Ovia is the fact that we've got a 25 amp controller as opposed to a 15 or 19 amp controller we see on bikes pretty commonly. With the expanded controller, we are going to get quite a bit of pep from this motor. So the Ovia is configured as a true class 3 e-bike, so the throttle is only going to take you to 20 miles per hour, and then the pedal assist can take you up to 28 miles per hour, which is the top speed. Next, let's talk about the battery. The battery we have here is a 52 volt. Yes, 52 volt. You heard me right. It has 17 amp hours for a whopping 884 watt hours of capacity. Now this should get you anywhere between 25 to 40 miles on a full charge, and the battery takes about 6 hours to get to that full charge. But Cyrusher has upgraded their chargers, and they now provide a 3 amp charger with the Ovia and Ranger models. Next, let's talk about the brakes. The Ovia is rocking Logan hydraulic brakes with 180mm rotors on the front and rear wheels. Stopping this thing is super easy. When we were out doing the ride test, I literally could stop as quickly as I wanted. The Logan brakes also allow you to feather the brakes pretty easily, so you can come to a smooth stop without skidding. When we unpacked the bike, the brake levers were sticking out quite a bit, so it made gripping them a bit hard, but you can adjust where the brake levers rest, and once you do that, get them closer to your hand, these things work perfectly. Next, let's talk about the gears. Up in the front, we have got a 7-speed Shimano SIS Index thumb shifter, and that's connected to our Shimano turning derailleur here in the rear. We didn't really get too much ghost pedaling even at top speeds, so I think they did a really good job with the gearing here. One of our comments on the Komodo was that it was a little bit too close to the ground. The crank clearance just wasn't quite there. And that just means that when you're going around corners, you have to make sure your pedals are flat so they don't hit the bottom depending on how sharp you're taking that curve. But with the Ovia, that wasn't a problem whatsoever. On flat ground, you get a little bit over 6 inches of clearance, which means that you can really lean the bike going around corners and stuff like that. So in comparing that to the Komodo, it's an excellent upgrade to see here. Next, let's talk about the extras. With Cyrusher, you expect a certain amount of extras, and with the exception of one item, I think they really delivered here. Up in the front, we've got our integrated oversized light. Now, first off, this thing just looks cool. It's not too bright, however, and if you were going to be riding around at night, I don't know if this is bright enough to be your only source of light. It is bright enough to act as a safety light, letting people know you're there. And if you're going to be riding around in an environment where there's some ambient lighting around, then that's not really a big deal. The fenders are great. They fit the bike well, they protected me where I needed it, and I don't have any complaints about them. We also have a rear rack with a few interesting mounting points on top. I'm not 100% sure what is supposed to fit here, but I imagine you could add some extra cargo elements here. I like the wide rear rack, and I think that really opens up a lot of possibilities for accessorizing. And attached to the rack, we have our rear light. Now, this is the miss for me on this bike. The tail light is not integrated into the battery, which means we've got to source some small batteries for it, and we can't turn it on and off from the keypad, and we lose out on braking integration, which are all things that I like to see. But similarly to our review of the Komodo, I believe this is a first-gen model, and so future models of the bike will most likely see that added functionality to it. Next, let's talk about the suspension. Up in the front, we've got an adjustable double crown suspension fork. This front fork is pretty smooth. You know, I love the fact that we have preload and lockout adjustments here, and although we most likely won't be hitting jumps or going over wild terrain, it's nice to know that you can dial in your ride feel for you. This front fork is air suspension, which is a huge step up from spring forks. As I alluded to in the beginning, I think the Ovia is pretty much better in every way when we compare it to the Komoda, except for one, and that one is going to be in the maneuverability. Because the frame on the Ovia is wider than the frame of the Komoda, and we still have that double crown fork, it's going to limit the amount we can turn to the left and the amount we can turn to the right a little bit more than the Komoda frame did. Now, this isn't a huge deal. You hop on it, you get used to it. It's a little bit more lean than a turn per se. But my personal preference is I like to have as much maneuverability as possible, and it's just something you notice you have a little bit less of that on the Ovia when we compare it to the Komoda. And in the rear, we've got a semi-hidden rear air shock. So we've got air shocks up front, air shocks in the rear. Now in the rear, there are no extra adjustments here, but you can play around with PSIs to dial this one in. The full suspension setup paired with these fat tires makes this a very smooth ride. The tires we have are 20-inch by 4-inch, which seems to be a perfect size for the setup. We don't get any sidewall reflective stripes or puncture protection, but they are pretty darn comfortable. The last part of suspension we like to talk about is the butt suspension. So the saddle we have here is this Cyrusher branded comfort saddle. Now, Cyrusher has come out with a few comfort saddles for past models, and it seems like they're refining this a little bit more, and this one I really liked. It was super comfortable. It has a really clean feel to it. There's just a couple cool little things about this saddle that, yeah, make it worth saying, like, I really like the saddle. Finally, let's talk about who this bike might be for. So this is a bike for someone who wants to be comfortable while riding around on sidewalks, bike paths, light trails, and then wants the option to tackle tougher-ish trails if required. The fact that we've got a step-through design means this will be pretty approachable for most people, and since we do have the included rear rack, some short-distance commuting is also on the table. If you guys have a specific use case you're looking at and are wondering if this e-bike will do that, let us know down in the comments, what you're looking to do with this bike, and we can give you some feedback on that. So we talked about the specs, some of the use cases, and now it's time to head out for the ride test. Alright guys, welcome outside to the ride test. We are on the Ovia from Cyrusher. Let's go ahead and turn it on. Now the keypad they're using here is a little bit different. I've seen it on a couple of bikes here recently, but it's very compact. I kind of like that aspect of it, and so it's interesting. It's nice and easy. So if you're like, what is this? The power button is on the bottom right here, so we're gonna go ahead and hold that down. Now our screen's gonna pop off here, and I really do like these screens. They're big, it feels sort of high tech, it shows you most of the stuff that you wanna see here, and there we go. So let's go ahead and, we're in pedal assist level 1. Go ahead and hit that throttle. Let's do a little riding. Now something that you're gonna notice about the throttle is the throttle's gonna take us to 20 miles per hour. Right about there, and then we can do that in any level of pedal assist. And if we put in pedal assist level 0, the throttle is not going to work. So that's a bit of a safety feature. If you have somebody who's on the bike for the first time and you just want them to pedal around, you can put it in pedal assist level 0, and then the throttle's not going to work, which is sort of like what most beginners, they go, oh, okay, and they might mess around with that. Let's go ahead and put in pedal assist level 1. This is probably about how fast we want to go. About 10 miles per hour in pedal assist level 1. Pedal assist level 2. That takes us up to about that 15. Nice, easy pedaling as far as the cadence goes. Pedal assist level 3. Gets us up to about that 20 mile per hour mark. Get on the other trail over here before we put it into pedal assist level 4. Do a braking test up here. Life on the line, heading to a road. Just stops like nobody's business. Now we started to see a lot more of these Logan brakes on bikes, and I'm liking them. I like the handles. I think they are doing a pretty good job. All right, so pedal assist level 3, let's go ahead and put in pedal assist level 4. And we're cruising. Let's get up to that 23, 24 mile an hour mark. And pedal assist level 5. Now the top speed on this is supposed to be 28 miles per hour. Most of the time I'm only getting up to about 25 miles per hour on top speed. Now this is something where we probably just need to pop into the advanced settings, and maybe we're going to be adjusting the wheel size or the top speed allowed here. But you should be capable of hitting 28 miles per hour on this thing. As far as the ride feels goes, as we've mentioned, it is super smooth. I'll go ahead and hit this bump down here. Cush. Just very, very nice. Very chill. Now what's interesting is, because the throttle is only going to take us to that 20 miles per hour, if you're going faster than that and you pull the throttle, it just sort of like takes you down to that 20 miles per hour. And some people might want, they want to go cruise around at 28, 30 miles per hour on a bike. In most places, even though it's still for some reason somewhat ambiguous, the top speed allowed with the throttle is 20 miles per hour, and then the top speed with pedal assist is 28 miles per hour. That sort of makes it the class 3 e-bike. Let's go ahead and do some exploring here. I feel like Louis now. Shout out to Louis. So this is some of the stuff that you could take the bike on. I don't know if this is necessarily what it was designed to do, but with these fat tires and the full suspension, this really isn't that bad. If I was going to be taking the bike on these sort of places like this a little bit more often, one of the first things I swap out is those pedals. Now they are folding, so it does have that like a nice functionality there in most situations if you need to fold it. Now, as we had mentioned, this motor is 750 watt Bafang rear hub motor, and yeah, it kind of performs exactly how we'd expect it to perform. As far as motor noise goes, for some reason it seems like it's a little bit louder than most motors we test. I don't know if that's just sort of like where I'm riding it, and the tires here aren't making as much noise as we're used to from these fat tires. They do have knobbies on there, but they do run a little bit smoother, I've noticed, than other tires with bigger knobs. Usually tend to make more noise and might be masking some of that motor noise that we're hearing. But from a cruising perspective, this bike is pretty awesome. I was a big fan of the Komoda. In fact, one of the only things, well, I guess my two main comments on the Komoda was that I didn't like the fact that they didn't have integrated tail lights, which I guess that did come to the models after the one that we got, which was totally fine. We got one of the first, I think, 4 Komodas off the line, and so they just didn't have that built into those review models. And the pedal clearance. But on this bike, we've got just over 6 inches of pedal clearance with our crank all the way down on a flat surface, and so we're really able to turn and not have to worry about putting our pedals flat like we did on the Komoda, which for me, I tend to, I think, just naturally turn with the inside crank down. And is that a bad habit? Maybe. For me, it's just sort of like the natural thing to do. So on the Komoda, I'd be hitting, the concrete quite a bit. But on this one, like I said, that is not an issue. I have not hit the cranks on anything. And it's just really ergonomical. And see, even with a turn like that, I might have wanted to turn a little bit more. And as you can see down there at the bottom, we've got these, stanchion frame guards here that as you turn, they're gonna hit against the bike, which stop you from turning super far to the left or super far to the right. But after you ride it around for a little bit,
you just get used to the feel of it. It's a little bit more, motorcycle lean kind of vibe. Like, there's nothing wrong with this amount of nimbleness. In fact, I'm barely steering to get that. But just in my experience, I prefer to have as much nimbleness as possible. Maybe that comes from riding mountain bikes, or even some of these other smaller e-bikes that don't have the double crown fork. That's a possibility. But that's what I would prefer. But like I said, there's nothing wrong with this. Like, this handles really well. So go ahead and do another braking test right up here. Get up to about that 25 miles per hour. And we'll brake in 3, 2, 1. Yeah, that's about 10 feet or so. Not too shabby. Now see, if you're going slow and you want to turn this, is sort of where this becomes a problem. You got to turn this into a 3-point turn. But if you don't plan on doing a lot of those, the handle's not that big of a deal.
And that is going to do it for our review of the Ovia from Cyrusher. If you guys want to know more, I'll have a link to Cyrusher's website down below. And if you guys have any questions for me, as I said, let me know down in the comments. I love talking to you guys, and we will catch you on the next one.